The lecture hall of the luminary nexus hummed with the soft rustle of shifting limbs and the faint hum of alien translators. A massive screen flickered to life at the front, displaying an imposing figure, Professor Dravex Talvar, his scales glinting under the hall's bioluminescent lights. His multifaceted eyes swept over the room, pausing briefly on Slek Voreth, seated among his peers in the front row. This, Dravex began, his voice a calculated mix of gravitas and disdain, is the species some of you believe deserves our trust. The screen changed, displaying grainy footage of a barren human battlefield. Explosions bloomed, and figures clad in primitive armor surged forward, defying enemies wielding vastly superior weaponry. Despite overwhelming odds, the humans prevailed, their tactics brutal, efficient, and devastating. They call it ingenuity, Dravex sneered. I call it chaos given form. Slek leaned forward, his blue, scaly brow furrowed. He had heard tales of humanity's ferocity but found the professor's dramatics tiresome. It wasn't the first time Dravex had used his platform to vilify them, and judging by the murmurs in the room, it wouldn't be the last. They're survivors, muttered Kirak, one of Slek's classmates, a feathery avianorian with bright orange plumage. Isn't that admirable? Survivors, yes, Dravex interrupted sharply, his keen hearing catching the comment. But survival at what cost? History shows their survival leaves ruin in its wake. Remember the Tarvaxian rebellion? It was humans who first armed the insurgents, destabilizing an entire region of the galaxy for decades. The room fell silent, the weight of the accusation palpable. Slek's tail twitched as he spoke, his voice measured. History is written from many perspectives, Professor. What if the rebellion was a necessary catalyst for change? Aren't we here to explore all sides, not cling to fear? A ripple of surprise passed through the students. Few dared challenge Dravex openly. The professor's gaze fixed on Slek, a glint of annoyance breaking through his polished demeanor. Ah, Slek Voreth, Dravex said, his tone dangerously soft. Your Tarvaxian idealism is charming, but naive. Curiosity is admirable. Recklessness is not. Slek didn't respond, though his mind raced. He felt the quiet support of his peers but also the lingering shadow of Dravex's authority. After the lecture ended, Slek gathered his belongings, the professor's parting words echoing in his ears. Remember, Voreth, some truths are better left buried. Later that day, Slek found himself in the Academy's archive chamber, a labyrinth of holographic records and encrypted files. His mentor, Professor Khalid Val, had suggested he explore humanity's history for his socio-political thesis, albeit cautiously. The archive's interface glowed softly as Slek accessed humanities section. Most files were standard, timelines, cultural data, political treaties, but a few bore restricted tags. One, in particular, caught his eye: Case Study, Outpost 473, Human Defensive Strategies Against Superior Forces. Curiosity killed the selection tiger, Kirak whispered, startling Slek. His avianorian friend had joined him unnoticed. And satisfaction brought it back, Slek replied with a smirk. Let's see what they're hiding. Kirak flapped his wings nervously but leaned closer as Slek bypassed the first layer of encryption. The file opened, revealing an account of an isolated human outpost besieged by pirates. The humans, outnumbered and outgunned, had used improvised explosives, psychological tactics, and even environmental manipulation to secure victory. They turned a disadvantage into an advantage, Kirak marveled, his feathers fluffing. Slek nodded, fascinated despite himself. They used everything, their surroundings, their opponent's arrogance, even their own casualties, to gain the upper hand. It's relentless. Their analysis was interrupted by a sharp voice. Voreth. Kirak. Dravex stood in the doorway, his presence filling the room like a storm cloud. You've strayed into restricted territory, he said coldly, his gaze narrowing on the open file. We're researching for our thesis, Slek said evenly, though his tail flicked nervously. You're indulging dangerous fantasies, Dravex snapped. Humanity's unpredictability is not something to admire. It's a threat to stability, to order. With respect, Professor, Sleck said, standing his ground. If humanity is so dangerous, shouldn't we understand why? Isn't that the point of this academy? For a moment, Dravex said nothing, the tension between them crackling like static. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and venomous. Curiosity is a noble pursuit, Vorith, but beware. Knowledge comes with consequences. He turned and left, his words hanging in the air like a challenge. That evening, Sleck gathered his study group in their shared quarters, a small but comfortable space adorned with holographic projections of their homeworlds. We need to dig deeper, Sleck said, his determination hardening. There's more to this than Dravex is letting on. Deeper? Kirak squawked. You want to push harder after that confrontation? Are you trying to get expelled? We've already seen enough to know there's something important being hidden, Sleck countered. The case study, the restrictions, Dravex's reaction proves it. Another teammate, a quiet Litharian named Javra, chimed in. If we're caught, we could lose everything. But I agree. This is bigger than us. The group debated late into the night, their curiosity outweighing their fear. In the end, they decided to proceed cautiously, agreeing to keep their findings confidential until they had a clearer picture. As the others dispersed, Kirak lingered. You know this won't end well, right? Maybe not, Sleck admitted, his gaze fixed on the stars visible through their viewport. But if understanding humanity can shape the galaxy's future, isn't it worth the risk? Kirak sighed, his feathers rustling. You're impossible, Vorith. Fine. But don't say I didn't warn you. Sleck returned to the archives the next morning, his resolve unshaken. He wasn't sure what he would find, but one thing was clear: humanity was more than the chaos Dravex claimed. They were a paradox, a species capable of both destruction and resilience, of terror and ingenuity. As he accessed another file, his thoughts drifted back to Dravex's warning. Knowledge comes with consequences, he murmured to himself. A faint smile crossed his lips. Then let's find out what they are. Sleck Vorith's claws clicked lightly on the archive chamber's polished floor as he paced, his thoughts tangled with questions humanity had thrown into the galactic tapestry. The restricted files he'd uncovered the previous day gnawed at his curiosity, and the memory of Dravex's ominous warning only deepened his resolve. Kirak and Javra entered quietly, the faint glow of the archive terminals reflecting off their worried faces. You're sure about this? Javra asked, her silvery scales catching the light. No, Sleck admitted. But the simulation might give us clarity. If we want answers, this is our best chance. Kirak sighed, his feathers ruffling in agitation. Fine, but when Dravex finds out, and he will, you'd better be ready to explain. Ignoring the warning, Sleck brought up the Academy's restricted combat simulations, his nimble claws bypassing the security protocols with surprising ease. The screen flickered, then loaded a program labeled WarSim 7, Human Combat Dynamics. The simulation began. A holographic environment materialized, depicting an arid canyon with scattered ruins. The opposing forces were starkly uneven. On one side stood a ragtag group of human soldiers armed with scavenged equipment. On the other, a regiment of well-equipped Haven warriors, elite combatants from a notoriously strategic species. The students watched in silence as the Haven forces advanced with calculated precision, their superior numbers and technology overwhelming. The humans, however, didn't meet them head-on. Instead, they melted into the terrain, using the ruins to set traps and ambush points. Why aren't they engaging directly? Kirak muttered. Because they'd lose, Sleck replied, his eyes narrowing. They know their weaknesses and are turning them into advantages. The humans used every resource at their disposal, collapsing structures to delay the enemy, creating bottlenecks that neutralized the Haven's numerical advantage. When the Havens began to adapt, the humans shifted tactics, deploying psychological warfare. They broadcast false communications to sow confusion and mimicked retreat to lure their opponents into a trap. Kirak's beak dropped open as the simulation reached its climax. The humans, despite being outnumbered and outgunned, emerged victorious. They shouldn't have won, Javra whispered. But they did. Slek leaned back, his mind racing. It's not just their adaptability. It's their unpredictability. They don't follow patterns, they force their opponents to play by their rules. Their conversation was interrupted by the sharp hiss of the archive door. Dravek stepped in, his imposing figure radiating disapproval. What do you think you're doing? He demanded, his voice icy. The group froze. Kirak instinctively stepped back, but Slek held his ground. We're studying, Professor. Isn't that the purpose of this academy? Studying? Dravek scoffed, his gaze flicking to the active simulation. This isn't research, it's recklessness. Humanity's unpredictability isn't a strength. It's a danger, to themselves and to us. Danger doesn't mean irredeemable, Slek countered. What if their chaos is what makes them capable of uniting us? Of teaching us something we've overlooked? Dravek's eyes narrowed, his voice sharp. You idealize them because you haven't seen the destruction they leave behind. You see strategy. I see collateral damage. They're a species that thrives on upheaval. And yet, Slek said quietly, they survive. Maybe there's something to learn from that. Dravek's expression darkened. You're playing with fire, Vorith. Don't expect me to save you when it burns you. With that, he left, the door hissing shut behind him. That evening, Slek convened his team in their quarters. The tension from the day still hung in the air, but their shared curiosity was too strong to ignore. The simulation confirmed what we suspected, Slek began. Humans adapt to adversity like no other species. But Dravek's reaction proves there's more to this than just their tactics. He's hiding something. Kirak shook his head. Dravek isn't the problem, Slek. The problem is that you're dragging us into a fight we might not win. This isn't about Dravek, Slek insisted. It's about understanding humanity's role in the galaxy. If their resilience makes them a threat, it also makes them a potential ally. Javra nodded slowly. We need to know more. But how? The archives are restricted, and Dravek is already watching us. Slek glanced at the holographic display on their table, an idea forming. We'll bypass the restrictions. If there's more data hidden in the Academy's systems, we'll find it. Kirak groaned. Why do I let you talk me into these things? Over the next few days, Slek and his team worked in secret. With Kirak's technical expertise and Javra's strategic thinking, they uncovered fragments of classified reports detailing humanity's interactions with other species. The patterns were undeniable. Humans didn't just survive, they thrived in chaos. One report described a human-led mission that prevented an interstellar war by outmaneuvering a fleet of hostile ships. Another detailed a diplomatic encounter where humans used empathy and cunning to broker peace between two warring factions. It's not just their adaptability, Javra said, her voice tinged with awe. It's their ability to see solutions no one else can. Kirak frowned. But at what cost? How many lives are lost before they find those solutions? Slek didn't have an answer. The more they uncovered, the more complex humanity became. They weren't just survivors or strategists. They were paradoxes, both destructive and innovative, chaotic and purposeful. Their research hit a turning point when they discovered a partially decrypted file labeled Psychological Analysis, Human Resilience and Warfare. The data painted a picture of a species driven by emotion, shaped by hardship, and united by a shared instinct to overcome. They're unpredictable because they don't rely solely on logic, Slek said, his voice heavy with realization. They act on instinct, emotion, hope. Javra stared at the screen, her expression unreadable. And that makes them dangerous. Or invaluable, Slek countered. Imagine what we could achieve if we combined their strengths with ours. Kirak sighed. You're making them sound like heroes, Slek. Don't forget, they're also capable of destruction. I'm not forgetting, Slek replied. But isn't it worth understanding why? If we can learn from them, maybe we can avoid repeating their mistakes. As the team packed up for the night, Slek felt the weight of their discoveries pressing down on him. Humanity was a puzzle, one that defied simple explanations. But one thing was clear, Their story wasn't just about survival. It was about transformation. And perhaps, he thought, it was also about hope. The quiet hum of the Luminary Nexus campus contrasted sharply with Slek Voritha's restless energy. Seated at a corner table in the cafeteria, he reviewed the decrypted files projected on his tablet. Kirak and Javra sat across from him, their faces etched with unease. "This goes deeper than we thought," Slek said, keeping his voice low. "These reports suggest humanity's adaptability isn't just a survival mechanism. It's part of a larger pattern. They don't just survive chaos, they redefine it." Kirak shifted uncomfortably, his feathers puffed slightly. "And that's supposed to make me feel better? What if Dravex is right? What if their unpredictability is more dangerous than it's worth?" Javra leaned forward, her silvery eyes narrowing. "Dangerous, yes. But maybe that's what makes them necessary. If they can turn chaos into opportunity, imagine what they could achieve as allies instead of enemies." Slek nodded, his tail flicking thoughtfully. "And that's what we need to find out. Are they a threat, or are they the key to something bigger?" Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a campus drone. Its metallic voice echoed softly. "Student Slek Vorith, report to Professor Dravex Talvar's office immediately." Kirak groaned. "That can't be good." Dravex's office was an imposing space, dominated by towering shelves of glowing data crystals. The professor stood near the window, his multifaceted eyes watching the stars beyond. He turned slowly as Slek entered, his expression unreadable. "Vorith," Dravex began, his voice calm but firm. "I warned you about the dangers of digging too deep. Yet here you are, defying protocols and accessing restricted files." Slek met the professor's gaze, his resolve unwavering. "I'm trying to understand, Professor. Isn't that what we're here for?" Dravex sighed, a rare display of weariness. "You think understanding humanity will lead to enlightenment. But you failed to grasp the cost of their chaos. Their actions have reshaped civilizations, sometimes for the better, often for the worse. Isn't that true of any species?" Slek countered. "We all make mistakes. What sets humans apart is their ability to learn from them, to adapt and grow." Dravex's eyes flashed with something akin to frustration. "And what happens when their growth comes at the expense of others? You've seen the reports, Vorith. Their victories are built on sacrifice, often not their own." Slek hesitated. He couldn't deny the evidence of humanity's collateral damage, but he also couldn't ignore their resilience. "If they're so dangerous, why hasn't the Council acted? Why are we still studying them instead of neutralizing them?" Dravex stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Because the Council fears them as much as they need them. Humanity is a paradox, an unyielding force capable of both destruction and unity. If harnessed, they could change the galaxy. If left unchecked, they could destroy it." That night, Slek and his team gathered in their quarters, the weight of Dravex's words heavy in the air. "So what now?" Kirak asked, pacing nervously. "Dravex knows what we're doing. If we push any further, we're risking more than expulsion." Slek leaned against the wall, his mind racing. "We're already too far in to stop. If humanity is as important as Dravex implies, we can't leave this unfinished." Javra spoke up, her tone resolute. "Then we need a plan. Something that gets us closer to the truth without drawing more attention." Kirak sighed. "And how exactly do we do that? Dravex isn't going to let us dig any deeper." Slek straightened, an idea forming. "We don't need more files. We need first-hand evidence. Something that shows us what humanity is truly capable of." Kirak stopped pacing, his feathers flattening. "You're not suggesting what I think you are." "We visit Earth," Slek said, his voice firm. The next day, the trio submitted a formal request for a field study, citing their thesis on interspecies adaptability. It was a bold move, one that carried significant risks, but to their surprise, the request was approved. Their transport arrived at Earth a week later, the blue-green planet spinning serenely against the backdrop of space. Slek stared out the viewport, a mix of anticipation and unease bubbling in his chest. The shuttle touched down in a bustling cityscape, its towering buildings and vibrant streets teeming with life. The air was thick with energy, a stark contrast to the sterile halls of the luminary nexus. Kirak clutched his data pad nervously as they navigated the crowded streets. I don't like this. Too many variables. Too many unknowns. That's the point, Slek said, his eyes scanning the surroundings. We're here to see how they thrive in this chaos. Their first stop was a local market, a kaleidoscope of colors and sounds. Vendors shouted over each other, advertising everything from exotic fruits to intricate handmade crafts. Slek watched as a dispute broke out between two stall owners, the argument escalating rapidly. But before it could spiral out of control, bystanders intervened, diffusing the tension with calm words and quick compromises. Did you see that? Slek asked, turning to Javra. They resolved it themselves. No authority, no intervention. Just cooperation. Javra nodded, her expression thoughtful. They balance chaos with order. It's instinctive. Their exploration continued over the next few days, each encounter revealing more about humanity's duality. They witnessed acts of kindness, strangers helping one another without hesitation, and moments of ingenuity, from improvising solutions to complex problems to creating art that transcended language and culture. But they also saw glimpses of humanity's darker side, greed, conflict, and moments of desperation. It was a spectrum, a raw and unfiltered display of what it meant to exist as part of a flawed, resilient species. On their final night, Slek and his team attended a local event, a gathering celebrating the anniversary of a significant human achievement. Speeches were given, stories were shared, and the air buzzed with a sense of unity. A young human approached them, his eyes bright with curiosity. You're not from around here, are you? No, we're visitors, Slek said carefully. The human smiled. Welcome to Earth. I hope you've seen what makes us, well, us. Slek hesitated, then asked, What do you think defines your species? The human smile faded as he considered the question. I think it's our hope. Even when things are bad, even when we're at our worst, we find a way to keep going. To make things better. Slek nodded, the answer resonating deeply. As the event ended and the stars shone above, Slek realized they had found their answer. Humanity wasn't just a species of contradictions, it was a species of potential. And perhaps, in that potential, lay the key to the galaxy's future.